we do have plenty of chairs if anybody's still standing.
Okay, we're going to call the facilities meeting to order and ask for approval of the minutes from the last meeting by Evelyn, seconded by Fred. Any discussion, changes, deletions? Having none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. And I think we're going to jump, the first thing on the agenda is the Municipal Center security. We're going to skip that. We have the judges and some contingencies from the court here. And we turn it over to Jeff to bring us up to date as far as where we are with Clark Patterson and moving forward. And I think it would be appropriate also because we have a 2 o'clock meeting with the core group and the courts and some honored guests that are coming that want to be involved. And I think Judge Krogman, if you could address who's showing and some of the background with what's going on there.
Sure, thank you, Dan. Good morning, everyone. First of all, we're just here to observe and to answer any questions as to anything that might come up relating to the court expansion or renovation issue. Judge Michael Kokoma, who is the chief judge of all of the courts in the state of New York outside of the city of New York, and Judge Caruso, who is the 4th District Administrative Judge, as Dan said, will both be here for the 2 o'clock core meeting. I think it's very significant that Judge Kokoma is coming from Cooperstown, where his chambers are, to be present at that meeting. As I said to the judges in a memo the other day, I didn't talk directly with Judge Kokoma. I've kept him informed as to what is transpiring. He has all the information that we have and that you have, I believe. He has the preliminary study. But the fact that he's coming shows his interest in what decisions or what discussions are going on in the subject. And I think that's very, very significant. There's lots of issues statewide involving the courts in the state of New York. He's coming here because he's interested in what's occurring in Warren County, and the same for Judge Caruso. So we'll welcome them here this afternoon. That's really all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to turn over to Jeff Tennyson and give us a little update as far as Clark Patterson's progress.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. We do have Clark Patterson reps here, Matt Smullen and John Norris, and they have been working on some additional concept plans. Based on the direction we got from committee and the board, we're looking at options that would extend the court space on site here, but extend into the municipal center and displace some other departments. So those concepts are being developed. I know John Norris has been working hard on them. They're not really ready and fully developed for presentation, but we are anticipating that probably the end of next week or prior to the board meeting, we can do another presentation of some other options. Generally, the options they're looking at would involve some additions, but then some displacement of departments in the WIC and public health area of the building. So those are being developed very quickly for discussion. We're just not ready at this point to present anything.
Okay, does anyone have questions for Clark Patterson? I know I have one issue that I'd like to have him expound upon, but does anyone have anything before I ask? Mark?
I was going to say this at the last board meeting and chose to table it upon the request of the chairman. What I was going to ask for was a needs and wants analysis based on the family court current space recommendations. We currently have around 5,000 feet. We're looking at now 21 to 22,000 feet. What I would like to see from Clark Patterson, I'm sure they have it, is just a breakdown on what do we need to do to the current court that Judge Breen showed us the other day that needs more space. What do we need to do for the new court? And what else are we doing with, to come up with all the rest of that space, and break that out per project and determine what's a need we have to do and what's a want we'd like to do. I'd like to see that type of analysis.
Okay. Evelyn?
I'm kind of similar to Mark, but a little different. I think that we did get some of that in the papers that were given to us. They said, they gave some explanation. But it was kind of my understanding when I sat in on one of the meetings there that while this is sufficient, this is certainly not, you know, this isn't the court's wish list, so to speak. You know, this will meet the needs and maybe give a little extra space, but not a whole lot. I was hoping maybe John or somebody could speak to that a little bit.
And I think that's where I'm coming from. We had, something was said as far as when John does his interviews of the court system and does his needs assessment, that possibly there's some overages on square footage in a safety manner or a futuristic principle that he might imply, so that we're getting more than the actual need is. And I think, you know, with my discussions with Jen and yourself, Matt, there's principles that you follow, and there's formulas, and there's also precedent. So we need for you guys to kind of give that to the committee and to the attendants here, so that we know, you know, how you go about formulating your prospectus.
Jeff, we talked about, we can go through.
Would you mind going to the mic or so everyone can hear? And
Do you want them to talk through the assessment they've done and then how that reflects onto a floor plan, or?
I want them to do the best possible job they can to explain how you derive at the circumstance to get to the plans and the square footage needs. So whatever you need to do would be helpful.
Okay.
Martin and I can share one.
We can share.
You have copies, and I'll try and miss something.
Staples, so I don't know if I've got it all or not.
Is that one?
Oh, okay, got it.
Maybe behind you?
You wanna pass that on to your supervisor?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Let me do fill work. Okay, there's this. Okay.
Matt, if you just want to introduce yourself for the record and to the attendants and.
Sure, I'm Matt Smullen with Clark Patterson Lee, and I'll address Supervisor Westcott's question about, I think he said needs versus wants analysis, and really this is needs. This is addressing everything that, based on our interviews, John's interviews specifically, it's the needs of the existing courts, and it's a good follow-up to the tour that was given last week. And what we've done is originally we had presented the needs in the chart format that didn't have any color on it. We've now presented it in a way that adds a little bit more of a visual, and again, it's a pretty good follow-up to the tour, because when you see the concept one, the floor plan layout, you can see where the square footages get taken up. And again, this is the concept one is not necessarily, you know, we do have two other concepts. The square footages that would be used would be similar. But the way we can go through it this way, and it sort of highlights, like you said, where does 5,600 feet become 2,000, 2,200 square feet? So, go ahead.
We do a prelude of McKinney's.
Sure. Yeah. Do
As
you want to run through a couple?
To
And
what Matt's going to talk about, I thought it would be good to have an understanding of guidelines from the Office of Court Administration, just so you have an understanding first of that. I did highlight a few guideline issues that do pertain to this job. The court facilities need to be handicap accessible. They need an adequate number of courtrooms, chambers, deliberation rooms, attorney-client conference rooms, clerical spaces, and guidelines. There has to be functions that were to address a degree of confidentiality. I'm sure we had all of this reviewed when we had the tour last week. In current and projected needs, we did call up, as well as talk to the court staff and court-related staff. We also talked to the 4th Judicial District, as well as New York City, on their projected staffing. I think I reviewed that before, that with a judge, there's also associated clerical and security staff. as well as a judge staff in and of itself. The court needs to have required prisoner holding. These are the guidelines, and I think we talked about these kinds of issues before, in separate patterns of circulation, and this is going to come to light when you talk. And then the waiting rooms, too. I mean, all of these are within guidelines. These are not things that we make up. Even though we do have experience with these type of facilities, these are guidelines. I'm sorry, Matt.
Yeah, no, thanks, John. That's good background. And so to walk through, I apologize if these are stapled together, as for distribution it made it easier. But if you flip to the third page, you can see the floor plan layout and how it relates to the square footage needs. And I think what I'd like to do is walk through that, and you know, it's similar walkthrough, I guess, so to speak, to what we had last week. So if you start with what's in yellow, it's the courtrooms themselves. Obviously, we were in Judge Breen's courtroom, and we saw the size of it, and he very well explained how tight that courtroom can get when you have multiple parties. So if you take a look at one of the courtrooms, you see there are 6 counsel tables shown in each courtroom. And you can see how quickly that takes up more space. So where the guideline might say for an OCA guideline 600 to 900 square feet, that doesn't take into account, first of all, it's a dated guideline.
I realized when I was less gray hair, these are when these guidelines were generated, and this was before the Americans with Disabilities Act, so you have to realize that some of these things have to be taken into account beyond the guidelines.
So beyond the guidelines, when you put 6 counsel tables in a courtroom, and put the ADA accessibility into it, you see how quickly that gets chewed up. So there are the 2 courtrooms, which are 1,600 square feet each, and then the court magistrate hearing room is probably similar in size to Judge Breen's courtroom.
Yeah, and
that's the one in
also
the center?
realize we do have accessibility there, counsel tables. Also, what was of a concern to the judge, as well as to Office of Court Administration, is having adequate means of exit out of these places. I mean, 2 means of egress. So some of these things existing are not required. That takes up space too.
So, okay, so if you start with, obviously, the core of the facility is the courtrooms themselves, which we see in yellow. If we move on, I guess, to the next section, if we move on to the judges' chambers, which are in green, you can see with 2 family court judges, there are offices, 2 sets of offices, if you will, for judge, law clerk, judge secretary, and then visiting judge. And we've also set it up so that the visiting judge chambers could double as jury deliberation for future needs if there was some sharing of courtrooms down the road,
Statement.
right?
And also, to backtrack a little bit, Judge Breen does more than just family court. We did some planning for flexibility for his use of time, and also for future planning, to at least have a civil jury box in these courtrooms for flexibility. Also for the visiting judge to also, Matt, as you said, serve also as a jury deliberation. But also, the judges are ill, the judges have vacation time. There's a need for a provision for the visiting judge.
So with that, next I'll jump into what's shaded in dark blue, which are the court conference rooms. 3 conference rooms per family courtroom, and then no separate provision for conference room for the court magistrate hearing room. And then, help me out with 2 other conference.
Yeah. There was some kind of discussion about the guessing on my part of attorney-client conference rooms. It is a correct statement that OCA does have a minimum of 2 attorney-client conference rooms, but realize the first place that when there's staff growth or when there's a new boutique court, those are the first things to go. Realize that when I was, again, more of a brunette than a gray hair, there was no such thing as treatment court. And what happens is, and this is all across the state, go to Broome County or whatever, these conference rooms turn into spaces for staff, and then you just lost the conference room. So again, it was an educated concern and respect, to provide at least 2 additional, as you can see, they were situated near the so maybe in the event that there were other courts, types, like Veterans Court may be coming. I'm just saying that there's other court types coming. So in the event that they're at least situated.
Right. And I think we heard from the needs of the folks in the courts that you tend to need conference rooms for people to huddle up, multiple parties involved in different court situations. The next area is shaded in purple, and that's again an area that you really don't have right now, which is incarcerated holding. There's the vehicle sally port that's actually originally we were showing that as part of the building. Now looking at it as likely to be a fenced-in area, so it won't be part of the building square footage. You could save some square footage by making that change. And you see the secure holding cells, male, female, and then there's a separate juvenile holding. And the corridor, it's obviously a secure corridor. It's not tied into the public corridor, and it's the 3 sets of doors that are in the corridor that's shown in white would go in lockdown when that corridor is being used for incarcerated. There's some sharing, good utilization of square footage that way by sharing.
Right, we have, I guess we haven't had much discussion about this in detail, but yes, this would serve as a locked corridor in the event the incarcerated, so we'd lock it and escort them to the appropriate court. Then it would be unlocked again for staff circulation, and also for attorneys to get back to the secure attorney-client conferences, which you don't have either, which is part of the OCA guidelines.
So next, if you move into the court waiting room, it's based on a square footage of 12 square feet per person, and based on the numbers of the anticipated people in the courtroom, that's how the square footage of the waiting room is derived at. And obviously, since it's a family court, there's a child waiting area that's added in, and of course the public toilets are in there as well.
We did talk to the family court, chief clerk and deputy. They were narrating to us how many people attend and how do they cluster. Every court clusters appearances to keep the flow going. And we got a count of people that are in attendance and the number of cases that they do create in queue. And this is again reflected on this point.
And then, of course, next is the support staff, which is shown in orange. They're, I think, modest, cubicle areas, a lunchroom, and record storage and restroom facilities. And of course, last is what's shown in tan is the security area, the magnetometer screening, queuing, and locker rooms and security-related control rooms and security office. So, anything that I missed?
No, I'm just as a continuity and complement to what you're saying. The men's locker room was per staff count, and also with regards to an additional family court judge. We also have a control room, a secured room. That's in case somebody does come in with a weapon, that they take it off. Or it could be a place where somebody's arrested at court. They can't go back into the incarcerated holding area.
So the point of presenting this in this way is, again, I think it gives more of a visual of where the square footage, where it comes from and how you see it visually, as opposed to just seeing it in a spreadsheet format where you see 300 square feet here, 400 here. You can see, this is an office space, or this is a judge chamber, and so on, and you start to have an understanding of where what's now about 20,000 square feet goes. I think it's easier to discuss than, what looks like wants versus needs. And
Is there a concise way of kind of addressing that we have 5,000 square foot now that accommodates family court? Well, we know we're getting another judge. you would think, you know, just in layman's terms, if you doubled the 5,000, you're at 10,000. Then you add another judge, you know, we're already up to 20. Can you kind of take us laterally how we get there? Because I think that's what the supervisors have trouble getting their arms around.
Right.
Is it that deficient, what the judge, which I would agree, what the judge has been operating in to date, that this need is so extreme? And can you put it in layman's terms to tell us yes or no, I guess?
I think some of the deficiencies that we observed when we were there last week just inherently take up space. And one of them, for example, was seeing somebody who was incarcerated being brought through public waiting and down public corridors. You take that situation that you have now and then add in, and again, this is why we tried to shade these to show specific needs and how they translate to square footages. So if you look at the area that's shown in purple on this on the floor plan, that's a square footage that you currently don't have in that space. And whatever that adds up to now is, you know, 3, 5, 11, probably, what are we, close to a couple thousand square feet there alone.
Okay, so that's non-existent right now, and there certainly is a need for that.
Right.
There's also a deficiency in confidentiality, which is an OCA guideline. You can see we have a public counter area for family court. Right now that's done right in a waiting room. I mean, these people are telling confidential information in the midst of a public waiting room. I mean, this is not, Judge Breen asked me in year 2006 or 2008 to sit at his courtroom. I think I did it for 4 hours. I will tell you, after every case is heard, you take a deep breath, and it's not just me, it's the whole court staff. I mean, there's a lot of intense stuff. It is a high-tension court. So all I'm saying is that that's another thing that you just don't have right now. I mean, there are just certain things in here that
Okay.
just aren't existent.
Point well taken. The light blue area, which is a waiting area, that square footage, I don't know if you have that calculated, comparative to what we have now.
I would assume that the 12 square feet per person you don't have right now in your reading.
Is 12 square feet per person a necessity? Is that?
Is an OCA guideline, and I think I can rightfully say that it does not exist. I waited for Judge Hall for an interview, and they put me in the family court waiting, and I felt like a sausage.
Okay, and the orange that the staff works out of, do we have a comparative of what we have now to what we're proposing?
These are... I think this is what these are adding up to right now.
Okay.
Like you discussed the lunchroom with me, not that that's terribly significant, but I don't believe they have one now. And you had reasoning as to...
Right, it's just the space identification for certain activities that we laid out in here. Also, we did have Ed Rodman review this.
Who is the...
Who's the chief architect of New York City. There are guidelines, again, for each of the cubicle requirements for the clerks.
So after you do your needs assessment and you have your layout, this goes to Mr. Rodman, the architect for the courts, and you collaborate?
Right. Collectively, what is supposed to happen is the following, that New York State Courts is a unified court. The local, the Fourth Judicial, and OCA down in New York City are supposed to be collectively discussing our comments on needs assessment. From what I've been told through the Fourth Judicial District and through Ed, that he and Bill Clark are supposed to be our receiver of their comments. So in summary, you know that we asked for a deadline for their review of these things, and they called us right on the Wednesday morning of the deadline. Ed called me One thing I will say is that, the only comment they really had was the judge, the judge office itself size. It has increased over time, and I'm doing something in Orange County, which is interesting, because I'm paralleling this needs assessment here with them. And it first started out with 200, and then before Ed Rodman, there was Prakash Yarwadekar, court architect. It then went up to 250, and now the present comments that I'm getting back from OCA is for 300 for the chambers, so that was his only comment.
So when you did a review with him, your assessments and your layout was acceptable to him except for an increased square footage
Totally
for one
respectful,
office?
sir. We only reviewed this with them. We didn't go over any layout.
Okay, so conversely, if the supervisors say this is still too much square footage because we know there's multipliers when you build how much per square foot, we want it reduced, reduce our cost, how would you go about reducing what you have here and still be in compliance and to get the okay from that architect?
If I may, one of the things that's already been done is if the actual needs calculate to about 24,000 square feet as shown on the spreadsheet, if you add the 21,888 plus the 2327 for security, John and his team have already worked to tighten this up. The elimination of the vehicle sally port, changing that to a fenced area as opposed to a building area. And then some of the corridors, I think the sharing of the corridor with the lockdown doors of the prisoner access and the judge's chambers. And then you said you were able to reduce the size of the waiting room. You gained some
We did more.
efficiencies.
Yes, you remember we never did draw chairs, Matt.
Right.
So we did a more intense look at that.
So by working to, like I said tighten up a little bit, this is actually presented in this concept, it's about 20,000 square feet. So, have reduced what's been computed as needs to what's actually been presented as the first concept. And then I would encourage to circle back to Supervisor Westcott's questions. If there's anything that appears to be, from any of the supervisors, if anything appears to be on this first concept plan, more of a want, more of something that doesn't appear to be a need, I would encourage the question to come directly to the courts, since they're here, and to open the conversation about what's being presented.
Now, the other concepts you also have, where we're moving through the municipal center, your needs and square footage assessments will be applied into those renovations as we go forward.
They will. It'll be an apples to apples comparison, if you will. It might be a little tougher to gain some of the efficiencies there. Where with a new addition you're able to gain efficiencies because you're sizing it and shaping it exactly the way that that you're able to, obviously, because it's new as opposed to putting it into an existing. So we're finding some challenges on the other two concepts. We'll present them. You'll know what they are, and we'll see. We'll have 3 concepts to review.
Okay, questions? Mark?
This is very well done, thank you. This is the first or at least I've seen it this way, and it really is helpful. So nice job. And the flow and the format really makes a lot of common sense for someone who's not an engineer or an architect. So I commend you on your work. I've got a couple comments and questions. Number one, we have been out of compliance with OCA for, it sounds like, many years. I mean, you could say even decades. Is that correct? We've been out of compliance for decades, and so we're doing a lot of catch-up here. So that explains a lot of the additional square footage. In a perfect world with unlimited budgets, we can snap our fingers and do this today, and get this fixed. But it's not a perfect world with unlimited budgets. So, what I first would like to understand is we are mandated to provide more space for the new judge. That's a mandate. Are we also mandated to come into compliance with all those, past OCA regulations that we haven't been in compliance with over the last 10, 20 years?
You recall that, back in 2000, when we worked with you on this floor and down to this actual floor and downstairs, that was to address the non-compliance back then. So all I'm saying is that there was pressure from the courts to get into compliance that deficiency.
But to directly answer your question, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that you would absolutely have to come into compliance. If you could build an addition for one new family court judge, and stop me if I'm wrong, and
I don't think I'm in the position to answer that.
okay. I guess that is anybody from courts able to answer that question better than I can?
Judge Breen, please.
I think historically, if you talk to people in Essex, Washington County, you will find that OCA did pressure them to build their new court facility. OCA, and I think they threaten money with what they're going to do. But I think that's what they do as counties when they say they're substandard court facilities. That is why there was a new courthouse built in Washington County and also in Essex County, because OCA lowered the boom and said these are not in compliance. I don't know, I'm not speaking on behalf of OCA or even Washington County, but I know that they have historically done that in certain counties.
Thank you, Judge.
And I think it's a financial.
I think that answers it.
Kind of a threat of the whole state county.
In my period of 35 years, there have been 2 threats on counties I've worked for that they would withhold, DSS funding to the county, but it never happened because the counties will fall.
Thank you.
Okay. Mark, are you set? Evelyn?
I guess my thought is we know we're out of compliance, we've known we're out of compliance. If we know, and we know that there's potential for a lawsuit, for someone to get hurt, I mean, ADA compliance, it's kind of accepted these days. To knowingly not do it just so we didn't have to address the problem and kick the can down the road further, I think A, we're inviting a lawsuit, and B, I just don't think I would be very comfortable knowingly failing again to address these issues when they've already stood for so long. So I think a lot of work went into this, and I'm very thankful for it, but I would definitely like to see us address our compliance issues. As long as we're doing this, let's do it and get it done.
Any other questions? Frank?
This is a nice job and a nice layout, but, would it be more cost effective if the building was more of a...
Can you hear all right?
Fit out? I mean, cause everyone with fit outs, you got footing, you got weight, if it was more of a box, would that be more cost effective?
I don't know that you gain much in cost effectiveness. I think what you pick up by reducing the square footage, by shaping it the way that works for the layout, I think you gain more by reducing the square footage than you do by boxing it, as say a pure rectangle.
I think, Frank, respectful to you, and the only place where I could possibly see that happening would be maybe in the child waiting to get that bump even with the toilet room. So in respect to you, that could possibly be done. When it comes to, this court ready and the judge positions, those are pretty crafted for circulation, but I think we could, we could address Frank's issue there, I think.
Okay.
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is all the colored space new building?
Yes,
All
it is.
new buildings, yeah.
This is the concept, and again, this is presented more for the purpose of discussing where, the amount of square footage as opposed to this concept versus another concept. But yes, and this concept, this is all new space. And if I can, as I'm looking at this, I will go back to the question about the square footage, the dramatic, I guess, add to the square footage, and again, on top of the prisoner secure areas, the courtrooms themselves have a pretty dramatic increase in the square footage. For those of us that were in Judge Breen's courtroom, we saw how tight that can get, how quickly. So when you look at the two large courtrooms in yellow, those again now accommodate 6 counsel tables. So that's a big change too, that increases it.
So
John?
oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mark, you have another?
I just had a quick follow-up, it was
Okay.
kind of a two-part
Go ahead.
question. I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
John, to interrupt. So, with that said, option 2, which was presented at the special board meeting, was to try and identify space within the current municipal footprint. Is there going to continue to be an attempt to try and do that? I mean, if we look at this, we almost could look at that area in orange on the right. If we could find room within our current physical plant, we could dramatically cut down. I feel like an art director in in my life, marketing, trying to tell experts what to do, but we're trying to find ways to cut the budget and do this less expensively. Is there some way to look at current space within the current municipal center, and are we gonna still continue to pursue that?
You'll see the next 2 concepts are the concepts that involve moving departments off-site and utilizing the existing space here in the municipal center.
All right, thank you.
Evelyn, or John, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the white area here is the existing building. And we're gonna be moving some of that out of there over to the new spot, at least that's what's being proposed.
Right.
Do we show what's going to infill, what's moving over to here? Do we show that someplace?
We have, part of this first concept also involves a future phasing of where, and actually it is, you're right, Johnny, thank you. What's shown in white now would be the future phases of the courtroom renovations.
Well, that's not the
which
way it currently is.
It's not the way it currently is. It's the way that it could become in the future. And again, I think those would be future decisions. I think the county would look at doing a lot of that work in-house. So this helps with future needs for the existing court spaces as well, to expand what's shown there. That courtroom would be a renovated courtroom. It would be a multi-purpose, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there was some effort. Again, we play devil's advocate with interviews. We're not yes people to anybody in an interview. We asked the frequency of jury assembly, jury impaneling, the frequency of courts. This plan at least addresses a multi-purpose courtroom and jury assembly purpose.
John? Go ahead,
Just a
John.
quick one. The big courtroom, is that right here? The big courtroom?
No, it's down
Donut.
Look at that
90
little
degrees.
box.
Yeah, you're
it's
off
down
the
here.
page for, and if you look at the,
Well, that's the courtyard.
Mm-hmm.
All right, okay, thanks.
okay.
Fred?
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same question about that courtroom, because that's rotated 90 degrees from where the family courtroom is now, and it takes up part of the family court judge's chambers. And
Right.
So is that cost estimate including this, or that's just a future expansion?
That's future expansion,
Okay.
or future renovation, I should say.
Well, realize this only addresses as part of the court needs, the family court element in tandem with what Matt is saying. There was a perceived need to have 3 courtrooms instead of the 2 that you presently have. You have the large courtroom for Supreme and county, as well as the county courtroom. The need, I think, is quite evident to have a 3rd courtroom, and that's what we're proposing as the next phase.
So that would be a county and Supreme courtroom, not family court?
The one that's going to be in the place of Judge Breen's present area, yes.
Jeff?
And as Matt and John indicated, that would be multi-purpose, so it would address the need for a large space for large jury assembly.
one of the other things Clark Patterson conceptually was gonna put before us was the other phases, other than the family court, and how to, phase them in and possibly doing it with our staff. Because the time restrictions would be better, and the work that could be done, we have the capability. So that'll be interesting to see that phasing, and if that's, you know, prudent to do when they come back with their other concepts. Judge?
I just have to interject this comment because I think it's timely, and if I don't, somewhere down the road, someone's going to say, remember that meeting we had on the 28th? Why didn't you bring that up then? And the point is, I think Mr. Strauss said, well, most of what's in that area, that white area, is going to be moved. All of what's in that white area would be relocated into the new area. We talk about phasing. I'm getting a little concerned. Here's my point. The immediate concerns raised by the creation of the new family court position have to be addressed. When I hear about phasing and down the road, it's not addressing just as important concerns as the family court concerns for the rest of the courts. And in the context of that point, that white area is extremely important. John will correct me if I'm wrong, but when he and I met, the proposal was to build an additional Supreme County courtroom and perhaps a jury assembly area. And I said to John, you correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe this comes under the Cadillac Chevrolet comment, John, that's not necessary. That's over-designing. We can make that a combined courtroom jury assembly area. And that's exactly what they have proposed, and I think it's correct. But the creation of that area and the improvement of that area, should the family court be relocated, is essential. It's just as important as solving the family court needs now, not some years in the future. Why? Because we need that courtroom, and more importantly, we need that jury assembly area. It is clogging, the lack of a jury assembly area is clogging up the entire system. Why? Because we use the main Supreme Court room as the jury selection room now. We can't use it as a courtroom while that process is going on. We need that jury assembly area sooner than later.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Hall, please.
Just to follow up on what Judge Krogman just said, and I think Supervisor Westcott made a very good point when he began saying, what's on your wish list, what's on your needs list? Everything in here is on the needs list. We absolutely positively have to have this, including the new courtroom, all of that we need. There's never going to be a better time to borrow money than right now. This is the lowest the interest rates have been in, what did you say, Peter, 30 years?
It's historic low interest.
So why kick it down the road and then borrow more money sometime 3 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever, to do that? Second point is, whether this is a needs or whether this is a wish. Right now, we have 3 judges with 3 courtrooms. There's going to be a 4th judge, so we have to have 4 courtrooms. But that's not enough right now. I can tell you it's not enough right now. We really need 6. So if you want to make a wish list, let's put another courtroom on that wish list. But by having the Supreme Court room is off the page here, over here. My courtroom's down here. This way we have 5 courtrooms for 5 judges because we have 5 judges here. Plus we have visiting judges come in for different kind of cases. So this is clearly nothing on a wish list. I don't see anything on a wish list. Secondly, Judge Krogman talked about the importance of a jury assembly room. Here's the situation. I'm drawing a jury on a murder case. And hopefully the person who's defending the murder case comes in and says, Judge, I want to make a motion in limine. Text that. I want to limit what the district attorney puts in a proof. I don't think they read him his rights. I don't think they should talk about the time he beat his wife. I want to put something on a record and make you make a ruling before it gets before the jury, because if that comes out first, how can I tell the jury, oh, sorry, you shouldn't have heard that, forget about that. It's not going to happen. So before that happens, we need to have a courtroom to go in and have this, motion to eliminate, it's called, this limiting motion. Well, I can't do it in the place where the jury is, 'cause they're sitting there. So if they hear, oh, we're talking about they didn't read him his rights, he beat his wife, they're gonna hear it all. So we need another place to go. Right now, there are a lot of days when we simply don't have that. I've done it in the, magistrate's office, which is like this, completely unsafe, security's a disaster, fire codes are violated. Sometimes, if I feel very, very comfortable about the defendant, I will bring him into my chambers. That's not a very good idea to do, to see the pictures of my wife and kids on the wall with somebody who's, committed a rape or a murder or something. I will do that when necessary. But to go back to the wish list, as you'll notice, the green areas for the new, visiting judge, the new, family court judges are 200 square feet apiece. And, John was just saying the new regulations are 300 square feet. And 300, 200, that's just a number. But you may be thinking to yourself, well, these judges, boy, they think they're big shots. They want to have this huge office. It doesn't work like that. Those offices are public space where a lot of law happens. Judge Breen has a lot more, multiple parties than I do, but let's say on a typical day, I will have a defense lawyer, the district attorney, a probation officer, maybe somebody from a treatment agency, maybe somebody from a mental health agency, all sitting in my office talking about this case. Oh, this guy's too crazy, you can't, you should put him in jail. Oh, no, he's really a misunderstood person and he had a bad childhood. He really has a drug problem. Everybody has to be there in the room and talking at the same time. So rather than use a courtroom, I'll bring everybody into my chambers, but there are chambers. I can't believe that these chambers at 200 square feet are big enough to do what has to be done. I think it's big enough for a judge and his computer and some books in there, but you really need bigger courtrooms. So again, the issue, and Supervisor Wood brought it up too, is this a need or is this a wish? Everything on here is a need, and I would say that this is inadequate as I see it. Now, I've lived with what we have so far. I will continue to live on. My guess is if I was a betting man, some new judge is going to be enjoying this new courthouse and new courtroom facilities probably after I retire. But we need, everything's in there. We need 5 courtrooms. That means the 3 courtrooms you see here. And if you're going to go out and borrow money, now is the time to do it. Borrow for the whole thing. Don't say, well, we only need to have this one courtroom for the new family court judge, so we'll borrow a little bit of money and just build enough there. Let's borrow enough money to be able to do the whole thing because the building is not adequate. Fred Monroe knows about this a lot more than I do, but it's my understanding in Essex County, the jail up there was just completely inadequate. The family court was inadequate. It was an old building. And the story I hear is that the county, and somebody from the county could tell me better, is my understanding that the county owns my courtroom and that the state pays them every month, every year, some amount of money sort of for renting the county's space. Does somebody know that? Okay. And the state came into Essex County and said, hey, guess what? You like seeing our $100,000 a year for paying the maintenance for that? We're not paying it. You're out of compliance. Get in compliance, we'll start paying it. And at that time, they had some incentives to be able to do that. But that's what we're looking at. It's a matter of, it's a valid point Mark, Supervisor Westcott made. We've been out of compliance for probably 30 years. They haven't shut us down yet. If we have to, we'll keep on going. Can we keep doing that? I urge you, don't do that. That's not a good option. Number one, the state might just say, guess what? You're on your own. You want to be out of compliance. We're not paying for it. But secondly, it's just not fair to the public. The people need to be safe. Judges need to have a big enough chambers to have conferences, to make meaningful justice. That's all I'll say.
Thank you, Judge. Fred, and then Judge Breen.
Looking at what we should be doing going forward, I think we need to think long-term. This existing court facilities have served our need not well for the last 10 years or maybe 15, but for more than 40 years. And we need to think in those terms going forward. And to Judge Hall's point about the interest rates being at historic lows, I think that's true, and it would be a mistake to not do what we need to do now. At our last meeting, I asked for the debt service, our long-term debt service, and that was just emailed to me yesterday, and it shows that our debt service this year is $4,444,000, it's going to go down by 1.2 million in the next 4 years. 4 years from now, it'll be 1.2 million lower. 10 years from now, it'll be almost $3 million a year lower. So we have an opportunity to finance at a very low interest rate, and it will have a very small impact on our debt service for the next 2 or 3 years, and then it goes down substantially if we don't borrow any money for any other purpose. So we've got low interest rates, we're nowhere near our debt limits, and I think we should have the vision to look forward for the next 40 years, not look for ways to cut corners now. I worked up in the Essex County Court, and I know what happens to the conference rooms. As soon as someone sees an empty room, they find something they want to put into it other than the conference space, and so that creates problems. So I think you need to have vision looking forward, that we have the ability to borrow money to do this and to do it right and to create something that's going to serve the people of Warren County for 40 years, and that's what we should be doing.
Thank you. I got Judge Breen next, Peter, and then...
Thanks. I just wanted to go back to the legend here. First of all, just point out to you all that the tan space, that's for the entire building, that security. Our security staff now has locker rooms. I'm really not even sure where they are down near Supreme Court, and we do have female security that does not have privacy on it. That whole area, the tan part, is not just a family court, it's for the entire building. Also, when we talk about square footage, and I was sort of surprised by all this too, because I never knew what the square footage was. But when I hear the presentation, the purple doesn't exist. We've never had anything like the purple. We're supposed to have holding cells and security. Doubling the 2 judges, you're doubling not only courtrooms, but all that, the green space. We're also told that, in addition, as you all know, a judge comes with 2 chamber staff, so you have a court attorney and a secretary. But my chief clerk is advising me that OCA is telling us that we will be getting more staff. So we are going to actually have more back office staff, it's called. It's in the budget, the state budget also. So our staff will be increasing as well. So, the other point I wanted to make out about this is that the light blue, the waiting area, that is probably, I think security will back me up, the most volatile area in a court, at least in family court. They really, we need space. It's really dangerous in the waiting areas. A woman got shot in Albany County in their old family court space in the waiting area by her estranged husband. And people are very riled up in waiting areas. So being able to move them about is very important. The other thing I just wanted to say is, you probably all wonder, where did this new judge come from? I'm behind that because I pushed a person called Betty Little to get that judgeship. And I think you probably know this story. OCA had a bill to create 20 new family court judgeships in New York State. Warren County was not on the list. And I talked to Betty, who's my cousin, and I said, Betty, it's an opportunity. We are short a judge in this county. We've been short for 50 years. Our population warranted 3 state county-level judges. We had 2, Judge Hall and I, not counting Supreme. Montgomery County has more, Fulton County has more, Clinton County has more. I sent her the figures and said, Betty, see what you can do. She has use in Albany, she used her authority and her power, and she benefited this county greatly by getting that judgeship on the list. They came out with 25, and we made the list. It's a great thing. I know it's a nuisance sounding, but it's a great thing for the people. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Judge. Peter McDevitt?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, Judge Hall and I had a very short conversation last Friday, and we talked about the fixed characteristics that make this in our interest to do this sooner rather than later. And again, interest rates have been mentioned more than once. It's a record low interest rates that we can predict for the next 20 years. A characteristic, and it's the obvious, we own our own land. Some people do not own their own land. That becomes a fixed and predictable cost for us. The obvious convenience of having this in our, under one roof. There is one issue, and it really hasn't been addressed, and it's a little bit of a question mark to me, and it has to do with renovation. and the unpredictability of renovation, and the architects, I don't know if they could address that. Is there much of a chance in terms of renovations that we're gonna find something that we do not predict at this point in time?
There's always that chance with renovation, and that's why I think we try to be conservative but not overly conservative with our cost estimates, and that goes both for new construction and for the renovation. So, you know, obviously, issues like asbestos, if you don't have the structural, you know, if you have floor loads that may be increasing, if you have, you know, increased record storage or increased public, you know, increased density of public, so there is some volatility, and you try to be conservative with your cost estimating when you look at renovation. But again, then you also look at, you know, we intend to, you know, help the county to figure out what the county can do in-house versus, you know, have to put out to contract. So, brief answer to your question, but.
John?
Yeah, Judge Hall referred to 5 courtrooms and, a pretrial chamber, and Judge Breen refers to the security entrance for the entire judicial branch. And just a suggestion, for me to understand this whole thing in a comprehensive way, I need to see the whole thing in a comprehensive way. It would be nice, and this is a nice size and it's very readable, so I give you credit there. But I would like to see the whole judicial branch of the municipal center in one view. It'd be helpful to me, and I think when we go to the full county board, if we're gonna do this over again, which typically we do.
Yeah, we did have that to start, when the core group met and we got our approvals, it was for the addition, for family court to accommodate them, then renovate, and we had those plans. When it was introduced at the meeting, we shifted some gears. There was, repeating myself, go off-site, et cetera. So we waded through all them, split the courts, keep the courts together. For today, we've kept Clark Patterson under the gun as far as performance and getting us something. They wanted to have something here, and what seemed to be a sticking point was the needs assessment. Is that a want list or an actual needs list? And that's what we were trying to accomplish. So what we did have is family court laid out, which is extravagantly different from what they're performing at now, and in consideration to the new judge. And your point is well taken, but we thought that if we could get by what they did for the needs assessment for family court, that dialogue would be very functional moving forward, whether or not we do it in a renovation capacity or on this footprint. But it at least got us to ask questions of how they derived at that. And I think shortly they'll be back with their other concepts, with the whole and totality of what we're looking at.
Yeah, I was just saying, though, that if you want me to understand this and how they all interlink, it'd be easier for me
Yes.
to...
Yeah.
I'm trying to draw it out where the other things
Yeah,
are.
I just didn't want you to think we're omitting it.
No,
We were trying to
no.
accomplish
It was just
something
a
today.
suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And you're right, we do have that, and I think this was addressing the more immediate question of the dramatic increase in the square footage of family courts, and we have that and we'll present it going forward, so.
Mark?
Thank you. Like that idea, John. Different set of numbers, budget numbers. In the special board meeting presentation, the new court facility was estimated at $8.6 million. That would be an annual payment, my memory serves me correctly, is $600,000 to $700,000 a year. Is that correct?
I think that sounds about right. For some reason, 560 is in my head, but I don't Jeff, do you have that in
Just
front
a
of you?
second, one second.
But you're right, it was an annual payment on...
Around 560?
It was in the 500,000 to 600,000 range, I believe.
Okay, we can verify
Correct.
that.
Yep.
The piece in the white, to redo the current footprint the way we need to get to OCA standards is, off the top of my head, I think another $7.5 million.
That sounds about right, and I think Jeff has those numbers, but yes.
So if we're to go forward and, hey, we should do it now, interest rates are good, and we're not in compliance, we're really talking a $15 to $16 million project here.
If you head down the path of addressing the comprehensive needs of the entire court system, that's what it would be, yes.
Okay, just want everybody in the room to, I'm sure they realize that, but I just wanted to confirm. And then, so even with the good interest rates, we're, you know, if it's 560 on 8.6, I'm figuring it's probably around 450 to 500 on 7.5. We're talking an additional $1 million a year budget hit, right? Okay, just want everybody to realize that, because in our current budget planning, which we just reviewed last week as a budget committee, in order to keep our taxes in line, we're having to draw $3 million out of our fund balance already. So I just, you know, I just want everybody to understand what we're really talking about. I mean, the judges are the most convincing people on the earth, other than my wife. So, you know, it's kind of hard to argue with a footprint, but I just want everybody to understand the reality of the numbers here, not just square footage, but the dollars and cents.
Mark, it has, in the alternative one, the on-site addition, it had 8.6 million for the project, 20-year bond would be between 609 and 667 annually. Okay, that was,
Yeah, that's
Brent?
what I recall.
Yeah, to put that in context, I'm just looking at our long-term debt service, and it's $4,400,000 now. 3 years from now, it'll be $3,881,000. So it'll go down by almost $600,000 just in the next 3 years. Just to put that in context, and it continues to go down.
Councilman, or Supervisor Brock?
Yeah,
That's where we are
when we
now.
start,
That's what we're paying.
when we start talking about 14, 15, $16 million,
True.
Yeah.
the thing that concerned me was what Judge Hall was saying. How much more would it be to take into account his concerns? I mean, if it's $500,000 more, I mean, what the heck, you know, I don't want to sound like I'm a spendthrift or something, but, you know, if you're gonna do it, you might as well do it and not, you know, cut yourself short. Because the one thing about getting justice is you really don't know the true cost of not having people, not having the process work. I mean, we can look at the dollars and cents of things, but we don't always know the impact of the legal system not operating correctly by being cramped or by not, you know, if we're gonna need more space, why don't we should look at all options. Why don't we take into account what he was saying, at least doesn't cost much more to see his thing, even though it's sort of spitting into the wind, I got a feeling, but I would like to at least see more rather than less.
It's a good point, and actually, Judge Breen and Judge Hall were both correct in that Judge Breen was correct about the fact that the security entrance would serve the entire court system. You know, so I think that makes sense to do that. There's some efficiency there. And Judge Hall was correct in that this really accounts for the current needs and does not account for future expansion. So I'm glad that point was made. And you know, as John always says, I mean, we work for the county, so we want to work with you to come up with a solution that best suits the needs of the county. And it's your expenditure. So you know, that's a good reason we're having the discussions back and forth. Obviously, it's not our decision to decide to accommodate for some future need, but if you want us to look at that, if the board decides that we should also look at some future expansion, we could.
How far is the future, Judge Hall? I mean, how, you know?
I think a lot of that, to me, the future is now, but certainly 5 or 10 years down the road, we're gonna need more space. And, I would suggest, making a wish list like Supervisor Westcott talked about, so we know this is what we need, but what we like, I would like to see a dedicated utility room, and that can be used for a million other things. What Judge Kroger is saying is, yes, we need it, but let's be concerned about this. So I would put that on the wish list, not on the need list, because for the time being, we could make that the third white courtroom that showed on the diagram. We could make that work. It's not perfect, it's not good enough for a big trial, but we can make it work. But I think it's a great idea, as Supervisor Brock brings up, is to make a wish list and have larger chambers. It just seems to me that there's not enough conference rooms around the criminal court area. Now, maybe there's some thought down the road of where the current courtrooms are that would be carved out some space for some more conference rooms, or maybe wish list how we have some more conference rooms around that white courtroom.
Well, if you don't, I mean, we could integrate sort of what we're doing now with the future. I mean, say, for example, we do build this, we're also looking at, the other option is to, move departments off campus in the future. If we build this, then we could expand within the system, so we could look, as you're looking at just redoing, retrofitting, or whatever you want to call it, this building, we could look at it with an eye towards the future, towards doing what Judge Hall says, and then in the future, move, so we could be taking care of, what I'm saying is keep an eye.
You're right, and we are headed down that path because, with the, looking ahead system, so when you look at the, this chart here, we have similar chart for, county court, Supreme Court, and the idea would be that we would be looking to be able to meet those needs in the future too, within the existing space. And that full concept has been pulled together.
And in the fairness to discussion, when we first presented as the supervisors, there was questions of was it more than what we need? And that's what the discussion was about, the direction to expand it, which I don't think that we've had that vetted completely. I'd like to finish up with a discussion I think has been very healthy, but it would be healthy if our chairman of the board addressed his thoughts and as far as where we're at, and I think it's always helpful for me anyways.
This is,
As I stated in January,
yeah.
address the court space, I wanna see it built on site, I wanna see enough room to accommodate it for another 40 years. I'm with Supervisor Monroe. I mean, I understand the finances, I dealt through the finances in 2009 to get where we are now, and I think I just don't wanna see anybody getting hurt, and I don't wanna see, we shouldn't use the word mandate for the family court judge, because as Judge Green said, we asked for that, and Senator went to bat for us, so the word mandate shouldn't be used. We need to accommodate the family court judge. It's not on the state, it's on what we requested, or through our senators, so it's not a mandate, and, sometimes that word is thrown out in the paper and it makes the state look bad. It's not a mandate. We just need to do what's right, and it's good to ask questions, it's good to have these discussions, but I agree with Fred and I agree with Jim that, we should build it for the future, don't go overboard, but build it for the future, and I wanna see built on site. I don't think it's prudent to move departments off-site. I just don't think it's wise on our part to, we try to have everything focused in one campus, and I think it works for our constituents. So that's my thoughts. I just wanna get it moving, and, my toes getting sick of kicking that can, so.
Okay.
Just need to get it going.
Thank you. I appreciate the judges coming and their input. And if you want to stay, the next thing on the agenda is Municipal Center Security. Might be of some interest to you.
Clerk's numbers are real expensive. I think we can get that number down.
And do you want to?
We'll start.
Sure.
Just put that in perspective,
If we just finance this, it's not gonna have much impact at all, because we're going down, within 3 years, we're down $560,000 on the debt service. And within, 10 years, we're down $2.8 million.
Now, how much is it to finance the whole thing, the change that's over
He
here?
said about double, so it'd be about 1.2 million, but we're going down so fast on the debt service.
Still gonna have renovation costs.
1.2 million?
To do the whole, yeah, to do everything.
That's the debt
That's the
service.
debt service.
Debt service.
The total cost
Oh,
would be
the
about
debt
14
service,
million.
what would be
Yeah,
the
yeah,
total amount
yeah.
of cost?
15,
I think he said 14 or 15 million.
And then the total debt service would be about 1.2 million.
It's like buying a car that's gonna last for 40 years.
Yeah, I'm not for that.
You can get it real low.
Okay, the next item on the agenda will be a discussion of, municipal center security. We have our county attorney, Martin Afferdew, who would like to open the discussion and give his critique on it. It involves some department heads, et cetera, so, it's gonna be an open discussion here. Martin, if you wanna kick it off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The events of the last week or so, in Canada and here in the United States remind us that we live in perilous times. That government officials, government employees are vulnerable, and they can be targets. We're reminded of that all too often. For some time, even though I've been here only a little over 3 years now, for some time I've been concerned about the security in our main building, in this building. I know it's been looked at before. I know Needham has done a risk assessment, and I know that the supervisors considered that. And I also know that you're undergoing a comprehensive study of not only your court space, but perhaps how this building can be retrofitted or renovated to meet some of those needs. But it seems to me that there are a couple of issues that we should be at least considering now. And one is the time that this building is open. I am of the opinion that this building opens far too early in the morning. I am also of the opinion that this building has too many access points, and that we can and should be taking a look at that. I think we're vulnerable. I think one of those areas where we're most vulnerable is by Lexi's office. Consider that. Anybody can come in to this building right at that location. Lexi is on the immediate right, and Lexi's office and her staff is on the immediate left. When you come in the front door to this building, my office is on the immediate left. Kate Hogan's office is on the immediate left, although there is some security that Kate benefits by for sure. But Kate Johnson's office is on the immediate right. I think we're vulnerable. And I think from all the department heads that I talk to, and I talk to many of them, some of them are here, I think we share the concern. I think what we would like to do, and certainly what I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that the committee do, is to continue a dialogue here. I'm not an expert on building security, but I think I know a risk when I see one, and I feel that we're at risk. I've asked Amy Clute to be here. She's here. She certainly has much more expertise and knowledge in this area than I do. I've asked Sean Lamoury to be here. Kate Hogan is here. Our treasurer is here. Lexi, our director of real property, is here. Joan is here. I've talked to all of these folks, and even some more folks who aren't here. It just seems to me that now is a good time to look at this, irrespective of what the future plans are for this building. I think there are some things that we can do now to address these concerns, or at least talk about these concerns, that would have very little, if any, impact on staff, and very little, if any, impact on the public, but at the same time would increase security for all of us. I've talked to Jeff, and I appreciate Jeff and your willingness, Mr. Chairman, putting this on the agenda. I would hope that we would think that this is a timely issue to consider as we go forward. And Mr. Chairman, I think that pretty much resolves or finishes my comments. But I do think that there are some things here that we can do, or at least talk about doing, again, that we're ready to do, and ready to do with very little effort. And I know that Amy and Sean perhaps can talk about those things if now would be the appropriate time.
Okay. Amy, do you wanna start off?
Recall, Mr. Chairman, we were here a couple of years ago and talked about this. I had our safety consultant, and I did a presentation at the time for securing some of the doors. I think our point at that time was to leave about 4 of them open. Certainly, in my opinion, I'd be in favor of securing more doors, limiting the access, not to your government, but just funneling them all through the same door. I'm very concerned about employee safety. You know me. I've been here a long time, and that's my primary concern, is keeping our employees safe when they're at work so they go home in the same peace that night. I'm also concerned, as your insurance administrator, and the work that I do with the liability broker, is your public when they're in the building. We had an event, as you all know, a week ago or so at the Human Services building, that I said to myself, if it happened here, how would we keep the public out? If we have a fire alarm or a fire evacuation, we have a problem of keeping the public from getting hurt, from coming back into the building. If we could limit access to one main entrance, we could certainly make your public safer as well. I'm more than willing to come back and do whatever you need and bring the Needhams back. They were unable to be here today to have a more thorough review or to answer any questions. But I'm totally in favor, in my opinion.
Kate?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to raise an event that happened that I think highlights what Martin has raised as a concern. Every Wednesday, the van brings the inmates in, and the inmates go through the back door right here, and I believe it's door number 8, and they're brought under this stairwell. And so the inmates fully know, are very well aware of the door that my employees use and Martin's employees use to get to our office, and they often see people going in and out of our back office. About a year and a half ago, I received a death threat from well, I've received death threats before, but this was from an inmate where the state police put out a teletype because they considered it a legitimate death threat. This defendant is currently back in jail, but at the time that he was at liberty, our form of security was to advise everyone in our office of the death threat, and it was not just for me, it was for members of my staff as well. And we had a photograph of him by the door, so that whomever was looking through the little eyepiece would know not to let him in. That doesn't seem to be a prudent way to conduct business. And obviously I have all the confidence in the world in our sheriff's department. They were on notice, and we had increased patrol. But it seems to me that we need to do something to address the inmates coming into the court system and where they are in proximity to our office. And I just raise that as an example of the concern that Martin communicated that I think is quite legitimate. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean?
Good morning. Sheriff York could not be here this morning. He indicated to me that about 5 years ago, he mentioned he thought there was a need to better secure the municipal center than we were currently doing. I believe in December of last year, we put a security person down by the county clerk's office. As the building stands now, as I'm sure you're aware, there's many different ways people can enter the building. Frank Morehouse could better reference when this was done. But the sheriff's office obtained grant money through Homeland Security, and there were special locks put on the building that use a fob to get in. To this day, those fobs and those locks have never been activated. What you could do, and this is up to obviously the Board of Supervisors, you could make it so employees only come through certain doors and then channel your public through one entrance, whereby you could have a more proper security presence. You could have a walk-through magnetometer where you can eliminate the possibility of people bringing weapons into this building. as you were now, the building is fairly wide open. And, you know, we think it's at risk. We agree with what the county attorney's assessment is.
Jeff?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. When Martin approached me with this, and, I quickly told him that I agree 100% that we are at risk here in this building. But I did have Frank do an assessment of our current, hardware, just from a facility standpoint. What do we have available now that, as Sean said, is not activated? And we do have those mag locks and the fob, readers on almost all of the doors, I think with the exception of the very front doors, is that right, Frank? Where you come in near the flagpole. So the system is there. We have the ability to issue fobs to supervisors and any staff that doesn't currently have them, but those readers can either use the ID cards or a separate fob that many of us already have. The other thing I asked Frank is, you know, what his thoughts are, and I agree with his assessment of where the public come in now. And there certainly are people from the public that will come in the front entrance by the flagpole, or they'll park in the rear here where what we call the supervisor's lot. But the majority of people that are coming into the building are already using that DMV entrance, or they're going to the Human Services building where they go through security and magnetometer. And so at least in my initial assessment, I think they're, you know, the majority of those that are using the non-DMV doors are our employees or their elected officials, and we can accommodate those easily, even through a fob-activated door. The other thing I asked Frank is if he's ever gotten a complaint from the public, or from anyone, having to go through security check and a magnetometer over in the Human Services building. As you know, that was part of the plan from the beginning. It was implemented when we opened the building. That is current standard for a municipal building, you know, and that is the current standard that we constructed that building to. And Frank's not aware of any complaints. I'm not aware of any complaints from the public feeling like they didn't have access to that building. And that is certainly a very busy and public entrance, and it seems to function very well with that magnetometer and the two guards that are there. So I think we have a little bit more experience now than we did a couple years ago when Needham Associates and Amy presented that security plan. I think I agree with Martin that, you know, what I see in the public realm and what happens across our nation doesn't seem to be getting less risky. I think the risks are increasing, and I think it deserves careful consideration. And as I said, the system is there now to activate. We can certainly do that right away with very little cost, even adding the additional sensors on the front door by the flagpole. The hours the building is open, we control that. Our staff currently now, when they report, buildings and grounds staff opens those doors, but we can certainly control that, and we can implement that tomorrow morning and keep those doors locked until a later time. Perhaps what we do is we designate one doorway that if an employee comes into work early, which we do have many employees that come in, you know, before their normal business hours, they would have a door to enter, or they could just find a buildings and grounds staff if they didn't have a key to get in. So that's something we can address right away.
Judge?
Just for your information, I have some unofficial figures that our court security to date has appropriated 347 items at the courthouse entrance, including weapons, knives, mace, and other items to date. 347 of what they try to bring into the court wing.
In what period of time?
That's from January 1 up to today.
And that was just from the judge?
That's just from the court
No.
wing.
No,
That was just
from
me,
you.
right?
John, I'm sorry.
Bill Van Aslis telling me a little bit of a horror story. I guess Connie was down in the basement, it was the print shop or something she was down in, where normally there's not supposed to be any, you know, people in general down there, but there was a man down there who wasn't supposed to be down there, and she was by herself, and it was an alarming situation. So, you know, I'm sure there's other stories, but that's the only one I'm aware of.
We had a very good presentation by Needham, who did a good study and recommendations. The feeling, if I remember it at the time, was that we didn't want to shut the building down to the public or make it any harder and to access their needs. And it didn't really go anywhere. I think Needham was taken back by it and just backed off it, and that's been put on the shelf. I guess I would ask those that heard it, which would be Fred, Evelyn, and Bud, if it'd be proper to, you know, have them back and make that presentation again, because it was very well done, and we had made an investment in it, and I think we could certainly work off of that as a basis point, if it's up to the committee. Mark?
Wasn't that presentation tied to a new card system that was like $10,000 or $15,000? I mean, if we're just talking about turning the fob thing on and it's not gonna be any real incremental expense, that's a different scenario as I recall.
Frank?
There's two different systems. The card system was the time clock, and also our IDs, county IDs. The fobs that are in place, because of the bidding process for the HSB building, we ended up with two systems, but the fobs can be married from system to system. It will take some input on our part, if both fob, like, for instance, if an employee has to go to both buildings, we need to program their fob for both buildings. But that can be done. We would, as far as this goes back 10 or 12 years, there was a study done, we were gonna lock all the doors except for the DMV door, and they talked about a magnetometer at that door. There was some construction involved, talked about taking a section of the county clerk's office out so that there was more room for the magnetometer, sort of like a waiting area. And then the next set of double doors down the hallway would be locked, and someone would come physically get a visitor. But I think that was if a magnetometer wasn't added. If we have a magnetometer, I don't see a need for a waiting area, you know, people should be screened and go through. So there's a lot of history here. But as Sean said, the grant through the sheriff's office did install readers and purchase fobs and software to do all the doors and the elevator. So they're all ready to be programmed. And last year IT had the ID system upgraded, so I think we're set software-wise. We do need some more hardware. We need a couple more readers. The pad itself is about $200. If you have to buy the strike for the door, they're about $400. So we're not talking a huge amount of money. It's more time to get it, the fobs up and running.
Jim?
Yeah, since Columbine school systems have pretty much run, they all went, it used to be you could walk to school, get into a school from any door and move around, whatever. And then after Columbine, they originally went to a lock, and then they went to the fob thing. And they do have people moving in and out from the public. They have to go through one door that's like a waiting thing, and it doesn't seem to impede anything. I mean, people understand why you're doing it, and I don't think it, to me, I was a little surprised given the campus that it's pretty much wide open as it is. I mean, I'm used to, you know, doing the thing and to get in. I don't think it would be that difficult in terms of letting the public in to,
Okay. Fred?
I'd be in favor of doing what Martin said, which is opening the doors later. I don't know exactly what time, but he could work with Martin and the others on that. But also securing securing as many doors as we can with the fob system, and I don't know why we can't do that right away. And then, and also hear from our consultants, another presentation on what else we should do. I mean, one concern I do have that I've expressed in the past is that, you know, this building is used by the public, and we don't want it so much as a fortress that people aren't comfortable coming here, but I think there's reasonable things you can do to improve security.
What's the committee's pleasure, I'm sorry, Martin, on, as far as the instituting of fobs and opening later, and maybe we'll have Martin chime in first here.
Well, yeah, it's not much, Mr. Chairman, but I think that, you know, the issue of opening the building later, is a concern of mine. I'm not gonna name these employees, but there is an employee, in my office, and there is an employee in Kate's office, Kate Hogan's office, who are routinely here before I am. And I get in around 7:30 in the morning or thereabouts. They're here, they're working, that means they're entering the building before I am. It's dark now, and that building is wide open. I don't know what the right hour is. I don't know whether it's 8 or 8:30, but I know it's not 6:30 or 7. I know that. That's too early. And I would appreciate it if we could look into that. I think there's another issue here that the county could consider that our constituents can benefit by. When we enter our campus, there's signage as to where these offices are and where those offices are. That's gonna have to be looked at. For example, if you wanna go to the county attorney's office, there's a sign that says county attorney's office with an arrow to the left, I think. But in any event, there's a whole series of signs there. By changing, if we're gonna change access points or ingress egress points, or limit them, I think that signage is gonna have to be re-examined. I'll give you an example of a situation last week that gave me a lot of concern. I was walking down the hall by my office, and there was an elderly couple who came into that entrance that my staff uses and Kate's staff uses. They were exasperated. They were exhausted. They didn't know where to go. They didn't know who to talk to. They were lost. And I calmed them down. I gave them directions on where they needed to go. But they had to go back out into the parking lot, into their car, and go to a different building. I think if we have one main point, and the public is directed to that one main point, they will be able to consult with a security personnel or whoever is there and say, where do I need to go for this service? Where do I need to go? If I need to go to the Human Services building, if I have an appointment with veterans, if I have an appointment with the sheriff, where do I need to go? And so I think there's a benefit to having that one access point where there's going to be one person, perhaps a security person, who can direct them so that we don't have these types of situations that occur. It's not uncommon for people to be kind of walking aimlessly down by my office. They're good people. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm not suggesting that I suspect they're going to present harm, but they don't know where to go.
Committees, Jeff, you wanna add?
I was just gonna say, I agree 100% with Martin, and we do have what we call sign clutter out front, trying to indicate where people should go to all these various offices. And so to simplify that, so that we are directing public parking, over to that DMV area, their choice is, do I need to go to the main building, or do I need to go to HSB? I park here. And then, as Martin suggests, the security guard, I know they're very helpful to the public when they come in. And we can also add, kiosks similar to like you see in the mall or something where you have, they walk in, they have a map where they can find their way to the proper office once they come in that one entrance. So I think there are times where when you enter the entrance off of Route 9, there's a car parked there trying to read 20 different departments listed on the sign. And I think we can simplify that for the public, and I think it becomes less frustrating for them knowing where to go. And then even if they pick the wrong building, they're walking across a quick parking lot, or just jump in their car one spot over the ring road. So
there's been a suggestion of some changes immediately, and then Needham coming back possibly and rehashing, and then taking a look at everything. procedurally, how do you see, or we don't wanna make any sudden changes that, you know, everyone doesn't have their input, but will this have to go to the full board, even if with the fob changes or the opening, of the building? And certainly everyone needs to be notified of the change and et cetera. What do you envision, so that we could talk about it a little more properly without getting off track?
I think if you wanna change the opening time of the building, I think we can just do that, because there is no rule or regulation on that, and my recommendation would be you consider 7:45, because the normal opening for the buildings is 8 o'clock, and 8:30 is our staffing. So if you went to 7:45, that would immediately address, the concern that has been listed in that area, and I think that you could just do. The fobs and closing the doors, Mr. Chairman, I think you do need to have a motion made by this committee, and, that would go before the full board to entertain which doors are going to be, you know, basically closed at this point, if you feel you're ready for that, at this time. I mean, apparently it can be done, so it's really up to the committee and then ultimately the board if they want it done, or whether you wanna wait until you hear the full Needham report. I guess that's really your committee's choice.
Yeah, what's the committee's, feelings on waiting and hearing on the fob issue anyways, Mark?
I'm ready to go with the fob, I just need to know what doors are you gonna keep open? So what doors are we saying we're gonna remain open and which ones are going under the fob?
Bud?
I'm not on the committee, but, I would urge the committee to make a resolution today and move the fob as soon as possible. In regard to the signage, I told Martin that he told me a story about the little old lady, the little old man coming in. We've got a sign right out in front of this building that says information desk. There's nobody at the desk, you know, give me a chain, I'll pull it out on my way home.
Fred?
I'll make the motion that we
Okay,
do
second-
both the.
Seconded by Evelyn. Discussion, Frank?
I would just add, somewhere along the line, there's gonna need to be a directive for employee parking, because I don't believe the DMV lot can handle all of the public parking and still have employees parking there. And that was a sticking item in the past, is there are some employees who try to get as close as possible to the building. So whether we designate this back lot and, you know, the lots out front as employee parking or whatever we do. At one time, we had a blue line in the parking lot that employees were supposed to park on the outside of.
We have that in HSD, there's a blue line there.
But some sort of directive will have to go to employees to leave the DMV lot open for public.
To have any teeth, that would have to be a board resolution as well, to be enforceable.
What, say again?
To make, to find that employees must park in certain areas, you'd have to have a board resolution to make that enforceable.
Okay, so we'll need some more work on that, as far as presentation-wise, and, go ahead, Lex.
Just a question, when you say locking down doors, but all employees have those fobs, so if they're locked, but they're still accessible by the fob, I don't think it would create a problem for employee parking, because I know all of the county clerks, the majority of DMV, some of the treasurers, all of my office, we park out in that front lot, so we wouldn't be in that DMV parking lot taking up space. So it depends on how those doors are gonna be locked. If they're still gonna be accessible by fob, by employee, they would be able to still use the entrance by my office that would be locked down, but accessible with a fob. So, I mean, that has a lot to do with it.
Thank you, Lex. I need some clarity on the implementation and the fobs and the door that's gonna be open, and in other words, what is it, can you be more specific about the total change? Before we vote on anything that would go to the full board, so that we have an understanding of what we're sending it to them.
Well, I think the best we can do today is get the intent of the committee so that we can look further into that. I think we've got a couple areas we have to be aware of. We have to know, obviously we can't lock down the doors now if we haven't issued all the necessary fobs. That creates so we need to do an inventory of what fobs have been issued and what access those fobs grant, and then start issuing, additional fobs. So that can be a larger undertaking, and it'll need the, support and cooperation and efforts of all the department heads, also to identify the personnel that they need to have fob access and what areas they need to access. We can immediately move to quotes on any of the hardware on the front door. We have, it's Lindstar, right? We have them on contract, so we can, get their quotes on the install and get back to the committee on that, if there's any issues, but I don't anticipate those costs would be exorbitant, that we wouldn't be able to just move ahead using Frank's budget codes. So we can do that. I think once we get to a point where we're comfortable with the number of fobs that have been issued and we've added the additional hardware, then it's some programming, which my understanding is we have the software in place. It's a matter of going into the software and programming when those doors will lock down, or if they're going to be locked down 24/7 and accessible by fob. That's what we would do.
I think it's critical to have the department heads tell us who needs access. Currently, no one in this building has been issued a fob unless you happen to have one for the HSB or the copy. So not every employee has a fob. There are a ton of keys out though. There's you know, it's one common key that opens most of the doors on this building, which I would anticipate down the road, changing the cores on the doors so that those keys become null and void if you really want to secure the building, because there's a lot of those keys out. If we change the core, because the key will override the fob anytime.
Okay.
So, there's a little bit of work, but like I say, no one has been issued a fob specifically for this building.
Okay, and my concern is you can do all that inventory and get that ready, but certainly the full board would have to act on that because there's an expense, and then be aware and then anticipate the delivery of the fobs and et cetera.
And there again, whoever's gonna make the decision, whether it be department heads or for access, I mean, maybe not every employee should be able to get in at 8:15 or before 8:15. I don't know that. Maybe every employee should be able to, but I don't know whose call that is. People that are coming in now at 6:30 generally have a key.
And they're generally managers or supervisors that are in here that early, or Martin staff.
I'm sorry, John.
It seems that there's a little bit of a cloud as to what we can and can't do, or what we should and should not do.
Yeah.
I think there is a general agreement that we want to develop an action plan, one that would give us some immediate results and an action plan for down the road. And I think what the support on this committee is for some kind of an action plan for now. But as Frank and others point out, that, well, okay, that action plan needs to be brought into focus.
Yeah, and maybe we should have another meeting and have Needham come to show what he had in mind, so that we follow some sort of, collective information that he's gotten and brought to us, and that we didn't, enforce or whatever. But it would be good to get him back, because he's pretty definitive about what he wanted done, why he wanted it done, and what it would do. So I'm just afraid of, I know conceptually I think we're all for it, but the implementation, we don't want to cause a lot of problems or get ahead of ourselves and not understand what we were doing and the consequences of, like maybe the parking, et cetera.
So, I'm just wanted a clarification on the motion that was, brought to the table and seconded. Is that a motion that we want to pursue an action plan that will have immediate results, and we'll get the details of that worked out by the DPW?
That's what I envision, yeah.
Okay, so that we want to, as a committee, we want to go forward with an action plan and with the details being worked out, and then we want to send this to the full board.
An action plan to move the time when the doors are open later, probably to 7:45, and to secure most of the doors and make them accessible by fob, and have a controlled access point.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? Okay, we'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you. And I think you have the airport, do you have the buildings and grounds? I'm sorry, Evelyn?
Frank goes, I just wanted to take a minute to tell him that I thought that the buildings and grounds crew was doing a very excellent job. I came through here last night and I saw the little purple lights and the holiday things, I thought it looked very nice and I just wanted to commend that. So we moved on.
Yeah,
We had a, do you wanna go over to buildings and grounds? You had some referral stuff?
I think we covered,
You did receive proposals on the solar, RFP, and those are being, reviewed by my engineering staff. I have not personally seen them yet, but those are under review. I expect to have an update, next month's, committee meeting as to whether there's a recommendation to move it forward on any proposal. The, item 2, we had been approached by the New York State Justice Center, and, they are interested in the space. They are being patient, and we've asked them to try and be patient over the coming months here so that we can get a little further along in the court discussion to see whether any departments would be moving into that space. So, we've conveyed that back to them, and but we'll need to continue that dialogue with them. Right now, they're on hold as far as moving forward on a lease arrangement with us.
Okay, and did you have a Balloon Fest report that you wanted to give?
I did, but if it's okay with you, I'll just defer that to next month. So, Ross, it was just an update on the success of the Balloon Festival.
Anything else to come before the board today? Having none, motion to adjourn. Evelyn, second by John, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's interesting. How you doing?
Yeah.
Yes.